This is another bit for Uplift Protocol, basically. All right. So, when you're looking at big cosmic entities versus other cosmic entities, how do you create some tension? Well, they're pretty much the big part of the checkerboard or the chessboard. And then you'll have the more, um, I would say, frontline protagonists or basically side characters where the drama comes from them trying to contend with, like, how do we combat this sort of thing. But you don't always have to start off with the protagonist having to tackle that all at once. You basically break it up to where they tackle parts. That's the reason why, in the grand scheme of things, um, Toth, Kronos, the Allfather, all of that is kind of like tied into symptoms of unity and the calamity that's outside. Kind of like how the Fifth Element tackled the thing with the entity of evil moving towards Earth, and how the Fifth Element had to basically stop it. But in that case, that's kind of like a character that she needed her side cast to help complete her mission. Um, actually, that is also a fun, genuinely fun movie. I'd recommend going watch it. But as far as Uplift Protocol goes, you don't start your aspirational hero off with like literally um, KOing the big bad or something, unless you want to go with a theme of like what happens afterwards, I guess. But in this case, kind of like you'll have like all these myths and legends that did battle before, and maybe the scars of that battle are in the wider cosmos. But you want to kind of tackle, depending on how you want to approach your writing, you just tackle it with smaller stuff at first, and then you slowly pull the bigger picture back. Again, Babylon 5 did a fair amount of this also, which, again, is some of the cues I am taking from Babylon 5 and from other things I enjoyed in my childhood. But really, you don't have to take it that way. You can easily do it in another way, too. It just depends on your whole entire setup as a writer. Most writers, that's why you have to keep writing and keep writing and keep writing so you can figure out what is my overall setup as a writer. And with Uplift Protocol, I did want to have this big whole cosmic sphere of stuff that's happening, like a sense of history and other races interacting with the universe, and then Earth comes in and takes a kind of a point on the stage. Now, depending on the arc that it's in, eventually I'm going to be moving away from Earth to showcase even more wider range of places. Now, you got a little bit of that in the prologue book, but it was just like part of it was just showcasing some events that happened before Eliza and her whole crew ended up on the scene. So, depending on what kind of aim you're going for, it just depends on you as the writer. Do you want to do a more focused in story on a handful of characters? Do you want to go wider out and then kind of bring it back in to where it focuses on some people and then moves back out again? You really won't know what you want to do until you start going for it. Because everybody has their own preferences. Um, with Uplift Protocol, again, I wanted to have that cosmic sense of like a lived-in universe, like that's been around for a while. Even taking some cues from Mass Effect and other things I've liked, to where it's like, well, if I had done this story, what would I've done differently? Because I did like the aspect of Mass Effect where it's like you got a sense like, wow, stuff has constantly been rebuilt over and over again, but again, they fell flat on their ass with the ending. So I don't want to copy that aspect. I rather have something fun and uplifting with with Uplift Protocol, thus the moniker for the name of the series. So we have that, and I basically um let's see, it's more like a preference of like if you're going to have all these big ideas in your series, you can still deliver it in such a way where the protagonist experiences it as you're going along. Like as they discover things, sometimes you will, or sometimes the reader will discover things before the protagonist does. But it's a way to get bigger stuff out there and that but still keep it focused in on a handful of characters. Like, even though I have a whole lot of superheroes built for this setting, they may or may not show up on screen. Um, that sometimes that just happens with world building. You have stuff there. Sometimes it might not get used directly, but it's there just in case you want to fall back on it. Ultimately, as far as the superheroics go, I'm mainly going to be concentrating on Eliza and her family and a little bit wider circle of her friends and allies. Um, and of those, some of them are going to have fully blown arcs in certain books, and some of the arcs will turn up a little bit later. But everything will eventually tie in to the overall like bigger picture. It doesn't have to always say move that bigger picture light years forward, but sometimes like little things like say one line in one book can end up becoming a whole subplot in another book. That does happen sometimes. That's the reason why, overall this first book might end up being more than the 25 issues. I just did that as a standard setup for the prologue book. There was like a set amount of stories that I wanted to build up in that book to lead into the first book. So, again, this is just how I'm approaching my writing. You might have a completely other different approach. It's just I've noticed that with some instruction on BookTube about writing, it's like, top 10 things new writers shouldn't do. Oh, you shouldn't go for a big, huge series. No, you should start small. It's like, it just depends on you as the writer. Do you want to start with a bigger series, or do you want to just start with a single book? Do you want to do a duology? It's entirely up to you. Don't let any videos or even my videos convince you otherwise. Like, you do you. You write at whatever thing you have or whatever theme you want to work on or whatever character work you want to work on. Do you want to do novellas? Go for it. Do you want to do poetry? Go for it. Do you want to do short form fiction? Go for it. Do you want to do more serials? Go for it. Yeah, it's entirely up to you. This is just my thought process on my own writing as of so far. Um, the biggest thing, like with book one, the big three plot points I have is basically building up Toth, what he ultimately wants to do, which, again, I alluded to part of it in the prologue book with him raising up basically a undead army to go up against Tomathon and his allies. See, Toth wants to take Earth for his own, but he doesn't realize a couple of things coming down the pike that are going to be there to stop him, including, backstabbing from Hillary, because once issue 4 drops, you'll realize, like, she is going to be a chaotic element in terms of, for the side of evil. Because ultimately she wants all of them to destroy each other, and then she'll pick up whatever scraps are left over and claim victory, and she has enough hubris where she thinks that she can control something like the Unity. She has no idea. In fact, most people have no idea what it ultimately is. And while I have rough outlines for everything, just like with Babylon 5, if some idea comes up that might fit in the story better, I might switch it up a little bit. Like, in case something's not working out, it's like, it doesn't mean with world building that, like, oh, that has to stay put. Like with the prophecy of the slumbering one, I'm like, this could mean more than just Eliza and her brother. This could mean a couple of different things as the story goes along. So in a way, while it's good to have some sturdy foundation with your world building, for me personally, I don't want to be married to all the ideas that come in my head. sometimes those ideas will morph into something else completely. Because again, when Uplift Protocol first started out, it was just mostly based on the tabletop game I played with friends. And, the characters were also much younger. Um, I've added characters to Uplift Protocol that weren't in the tabletop, but I'm also going to have some things happen that might give a wink and a nod to that, because some of my friends are already looking for that with even with the prologue book. And even in book one, I've already included one of my buddies, his character. He's part of the premier demi team that's there, and based on how that character's built, he'll probably show up again at some point, especially during probably book three, like late book three, because the defense of Earth is going to have to come into play sooner rather than later. Because, again, stuff has been set in motion where uh, Toth, Kronos, and even the Allfather think they're the apex person in the setting, but oh no, no, there's something so much worse. Because just like comic books, like you can always escalate or de-escalate a situation depending on what's happening. You can have quieter moments where there's a little bit of character building, and then you have the more bombastic moments where, like, here's the superpowers coming into play, and you can even have that all in one chapter. It just depends on what you want to do as a writer and what you love as a reader, and again, you're your own best resource. Um, but God, sometimes I lose the overall train of thought. But yeah, as far as like whatever you're gonna do with your books, take stuff with a grain of salt. It's there some most of the time to be as a guideline, but you don't have to follow it to a T. Um, you won't really understand what you're doing until you actually just sit down and do it. Uh, some writers prefer having more character moments than anything else, kind of like vinaigrettes or something, or however you say it. I'm probably butchering the English language every day. That is okay. That is the Florida woman's job, to always butcher the English language. But for me, I always like to have character moments that help propel the story forward. Because I don't want to have them get caught up in the whole waxing poetic, like kind of like pages and pages of philosophy. That's just not the kind of thing I want to do. Some books like God, what was it? The Sword of Truth series. There's a reason why Richard is known for going off on tangents, and yes, there's a little bit of writer self-insert there because Goodkind likes to have his own ruminations on Ayn Rand and everything through his books, from what I can see. Do I necessarily think that makes Richard Rahl Mary Stew or Marty Stew or whatnot? No, because he does face setbacks. He does have to figure things out. I just honestly, I think Richard Rahl is kind of like a flat art character in a way, because he has a very set form of view of the world. The world around him is constantly trying to change his mind, but he keeps going forward with what he believes to be his truth because he's already set with what his truth is. So, there we go, tying it a little bit back into flat art characters, and maybe some people saying, like, oh, this person's too overpowered, that means they're Mary Sue. And it's like, again, that's not always what Mary Sue can indicate. To me, Mary Sue, like I explained before, is more of a mechanical everything at max character, wherein you don't really need a story anymore with a character like that. It's like, because what else can they really do to propel stuff forward except for artificially? Now, with Uplift Protocol, I also wanted to explore the themes of family, and you can even have a good amount of drama, even just that end, where, yes, like Star's mother has a very important job at Area 51, but hopefully I'm showing through some of the actions that she genuinely enjoys her time with her family. The sense of responsibility is different, and once they get to Taifa and you see some of that stuff on that end, you'll understand why Star's mother considered it a vacation to be at Earth, basically, in the grand scheme of things. Because that gilded cage problem, man, that's going to come to the forefront later on. Ooh boy, is it ever. And like even with the example, like when I launch issue 4 later, because again, I'm still just picking up the last bit of stuff. I'm making notes because I like to make little notes about whatever changes might need to occur in the overall story. It helps me keep my internal chronological stuff consistent and like how I want to use the powers. It's just more of a personal thing for me. So even with this issue, I'm showcasing like how Eddie's stuff can be really useful, but also later on it's going to show that it's going to be a little bit of a detriment because he does get rather nosy. I mean, you got to give a character a little bit of negative points, I guess, but I'm not going to ham it up so much as the rest of dystopian nihilistic fiction. It's just more like he's going to have a little realization later. It's like, yeah, sometimes it might be better to keep certain things on the down low. But again, I wanted to show that some superpowers that are considered kind of useless in comic book land, I'm trying to make it seem like it's a lot more useful here. Like, because there's different ways you can use powers. Healers are definitely not useless. In fact, again, Doc's stuff, like, there's going to be a point where she'll come across, like, oh my god, I can use my powers to do what now? Because it doesn't come naturally to her in terms of, like, legitimately harming someone, but she will get tempted by it at some point. Especially when it comes to Hillary Brooks. Oh boy, yeah. But it's gonna come in. It's gonna be like a little character moment for her to where she'll learn and grow from it. But again, like with anything else, you just add what you want to the cake. Not everybody will latch on to everything. There's no way you can 100% please any reader. But if you get, I'd say, a good 75% out of them, then that's pretty good. Because again, the only way you can really truly cater to yourself is write for yourself. And then you can put in 100% of everything that you want to in it. Again, my hard line stop at that is child abuse, pedophilia, that sort of thing. It's like, no, do not ever do. Oh, God. I mean, it's bad enough that I have my bad guys using kids as cannon fodder, but you don't have to put that stuff directly on screen if you don't want to. Like as far as like battle kids, like child soldiers and all that. I'm not going to put that directly on the screen. It's implied enough as it is with Uplift Protocol, but legitimately with child predation and child pedophilia shit, nuke it from orbit. Yeah, nobody will ever convince me otherwise to do not nuke it from orbit. Like, oh god. Then that's part of the reason why I'm not really covering that stuff so much on this channel. Again, this is mostly my thought process on books, writing, trying to get other indies to the surface. Because I figure that way I can help fight and change the culture war, in my own little way. I mean, I don't know how much of my drops will change things, but if enough drops are in the ocean, we can change a whole lot of heads, I imagine. So, see you later, everybody, and have a good night.